The city of Kyiv in November of 1977 was a study in grayscale. The Dnieper River moved like a sluggish vein of liquid lead through the heart of the metropolis, reflecting a sky that refused to show the sun for weeks at a time. On Khreshchatyk Street, the grand Stalinist architecture loomed over the citizens, a constant physical reminder of the power of the state. It was a city of whispers, of collars turned up against the biting wind, and of eyes that knew better than to linger too long on anything unusual. In an exclusive apartment block reserved for the party elite, overlooking the Bessarabsky market, lived the Volkov family. To the outside observer, they were the pinnacle of Soviet success, the very model of the new Soviet man. Viktor Volkov was 52 years old, a colonel in the KGB's second chief directorate, responsible for internal security and counterintelligence within the Ukrainian SSR. He was a man carved from granite, stoic, efficient, and utterly devoid of ambiguity. His uniform was always immaculate, his boots polished to a mirror shine that reflected the harsh fluorescent lights of his office on Volodymyrska Street. His wife, Galina Volkova, was equally formidable. A high-ranking administrator in the local Ministry of Education, she was the gatekeeper of ideology for the city's youth. She determined which textbooks were printed, which teachers were promoted, and which students showed the proper political maturity to advance to university. They were a power couple in the truest sense of the word, their lives woven inextricably into the fabric of the state. They enjoyed the privileges that came with their loyalty: a dacha in the countryside, access to special stores stocked with imported goods, and a black Volga sedan that ferried Viktor to and from headquarters. But their greatest pride and their ultimate tragedy was their son, Andrei. Andrei Volkov was 24 years old in 1977. He was handsome in a quiet, brooding way, with his mother's sharp intelligence and his father's dark eyes. He had been raised in the bubble of the elite, insulated from the breadlines and the shortages that defined life for the ordinary worker. He had attended the best schools, received private tutoring in English and French, and was currently employed as a junior archivist at the Central State Archive of Public Organizations. It was a prestigious position for a young man, a stepping stone to a career in the diplomatic corps or the intelligence services. However, the Volkov apartment, with its high ceilings and heavy oak furniture, was not a home filled with warmth. It was a place of silence and expectation. Dinner conversations were formal affairs, like briefing sessions. Viktor would speak of the need for vigilance against Western corruption. Galina would recount the successful implementation of new ideological curriculums. Andrei would listen, nod, and eat. But in the autumn of 1977, the silence in the Volkov household had changed texture. It was no longer the silence of discipline. It was the silence of secrets. Viktor, with his lifetime of training in detecting deception, felt a subtle shift in the air. He noticed the way Andrei's gaze would drift during conversations, the slight hesitation before he answered a question about his day, the way he would retreat to his room immediately after meals. Viktor told himself it was just the restlessness of youth, the pressure of his new job. He was wrong. The rot had already set in. The perfect Soviet family was about to become the setting for a nightmare that would end in a betrayal so profound it would remain classified for 40 years. To understand why Andrei Volkov turned against the world that had created him, one must understand his work. The Central State Archive was a mausoleum of paper. It was a vast, temperature-controlled labyrinth of shelves and boxes containing the bureaucratic heartbeat of the Republic. Andrei's job, ostensibly, was to organize and catalog personnel files from the post-war Reconstruction period. It was dull, repetitive work, the kind that numbs the mind. But Andrei was curious, and in the Soviet Union, curiosity was a dangerous affliction. Because of his father's high rank, Andrei had a security clearance level that far exceeded his pay grade. He had access to the Spetskran, the special storage section where restricted documents were kept. Initially, he ventured there simply to alleviate the boredom. He wanted to read unedited accounts of the war, perhaps find mention of his grandfather's service. What he found instead was the truth. Throughout the spring and summer of 1977, Andrei spent his lunch breaks and late evenings in the dusty silence of the Spetskran. He began pulling files that had nothing to do with his assignment. He read reports on the famine of the 1930s. documents that flatly contradicted the history books his mother approved for the city's schools. He read the arrest records of poets and playwrights from the 1960s, men and women who had vanished into the Gulag system for writing verses that praised the Ukrainian landscape without mentioning the party. He saw the erasures. He saw photographs where faces had been inked out, names that had been scraped off manifests with razor blades. He realized with a slow, creeping horror that his entire reality was a fabrication. The history he had been taught, the heroic narrative of the state that his father defended and his mother propagated, was a tapestry woven over a mountain of corpses. One afternoon in September, he found a file on a man named Petro V., a distant cousin of his mother, whom he had been told died of pneumonia in 1952. The file was thin. It contained a single interrogation protocol and a death certificate. The cause of death was listed as heart failure, but the interrogation log, dated 2 days prior to the death, detailed a confession extracted under special measures. The signature at the bottom of the arresting officer's report was familiar. It was a younger, less steady version of the signature Andrei saw every time his father signed a birthday card. Major Viktor Volkov, 1952. Andrei sat in the archives, the fluorescent light humming overhead, staring at his father's signature. He felt a physical sickness, a vertigo that made the room spin. The man who sat at the head of the dinner table, the man who spoke of honor and duty, had personally overseen the torture of his own wife's cousin. And his mother. Did she know? She must have known. The cousin had simply ceased to exist, erased from family albums and conversations. That evening, Andrei went home and looked at his parents with new eyes. He saw them not as guardians of order, but as jailers. He saw the blood on his father's manicured hands and the lies in his mother's lectures. He realized he was living in a slaughterhouse that had been renovated to look like a palace. And he decided, in the quiet fury of his own heart, that he could not remain a spectator. Disillusionment is a solitary activity, but action requires company. Andrei knew he couldn't destroy the system, but he needed to prove to himself that he wasn't part of it. He began to seek out the cracks in the concrete. It started with a radio. In his bedroom, Andrei had an old VEF transistor radio. He discovered that if he modified the antenna wire and positioned the device near the radiator at a specific angle, he could cut through the jamming signals that blanketed the city. Late at night, with a blanket thrown over his head to muffle the sound, he tuned into the forbidden frequencies. Voice of America, BBC Russian service, Radio Liberty. He heard news of the world that was completely absent from Pravda. He heard about the human rights movements gaining traction in Europe, about the Helsinki Accords, about the true state of the Soviet economy. He heard literature being read aloud, Solzhenitsyn, Orwell, Pasternak. These voices became his nightly communion, a lifeline to a reality where truth mattered. But listening wasn't enough. He needed to touch the resistance. Through a university friend he hadn't seen in years, a nervous young man named Nikolai who wore thick glasses and smelled perpetually of cheap tobacco, Andrei was introduced to the world of samizdat, self-publishing. It was a shadow network of handwritten manuscripts, typed carbon copies, and blurry photographs of banned books passed from hand to hand. The exchange happened in a crowded metro station. Nikolai handed Andrei a wrapped parcel that looked like a loaf of bread but felt too heavy. "Read it tonight," Nikolai whispered, not looking at him. "Pass it back to me tomorrow at the library. Do not show it to anyone. Do not leave it unattended." Inside the parcel was a typed copy of a manuscript documenting the suppression of Ukrainian culture. It was poorly typed, riddled with errors, but the words burned with an intensity Andrei had never encountered. He stayed up all night reading it, his heart pounding against his ribs. This was dangerous. Possession of samizdat was a crime under Article 62 of the Criminal Code, anti-Soviet agitation and propaganda. The penalty was 7 years in a labor camp, followed by 5 years of exile. For the son of a KGB colonel, the penalty would be something worse than prison. It would be total disgrace. Yet Andrei felt a thrill he had never experienced before. It was the thrill of agency. For the first time in his life, he was making a choice that wasn't scripted for him. He began to take risks. He used the photocopier at the archive, strictly monitored and logged, to copy pages of documents he wasn't supposed to have. He doctored the usage logs, forging the signatures of senior staff. He began compiling a dossier. He didn't know who he would give it to or what he would do with it, but he felt a compulsion to preserve the truth before it could be erased. He stole copies of execution orders from the 1930s. He stole reports on the current mental health of political prisoners being held in psychiatric wards, a favorite tactic of the KGB in the 1970s. He hid these documents in the one place he knew his parents would never look, inside the hollowed-out casing of the old television set in his bedroom that had been broken for years. It was a reckless, amateurish hiding spot, but Andrei was arrogant with the invincibility of a man who believes he has the moral high ground. He forgot that he was living in a house with a professional hunter. It was mid-October when Viktor Volkov first sensed the danger. It wasn't evidence, it was instinct. He had spent 30 years reading people, the twitch of an eyelid, the dryness of a mouth, the overly casual tone of a voice. He knew the signs of a man who was hiding something. The incident occurred during a Sunday dinner. Galina had prepared a roast, a rarity that she had procured through her connections. The mood was ostensibly light. Viktor was recounting a meeting he'd had with colleagues from Moscow, complaining about the bureaucratic sluggishness of the central planners. The problem, Viktor said, slicing the meat with surgical precision, is that too many people have forgotten the value of discipline. They want the rewards of the revolution without the sacrifice. Andrei, who had been pushing his food around his plate, suddenly spoke up. Or perhaps they are tired of sacrificing for rewards they never see. The silence that followed was absolute. The clinking of silverware stopped. Galina looked at her son, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and warning. Viktor slowly placed his knife and fork down on the table. He turned his head to look at Andrei, his face a mask of calm curiosity. "Explain," Viktor said softly. Andrei felt the adrenaline spike, but he didn't back down. "I walk to work every day, Father. I see the lines at the stores. I see the faces on the trolley bus. People are exhausted. We talk about the glorious future, but the present is gray. The present is a struggle." Galina interjected quickly, trying to diffuse the tension. "That is the nature of building socialism, Andrei. You know this." "But whose struggle?" Andrei asked, looking directly at his father. "We don't struggle. We have this apartment. We have this meat. Why is our struggle different from theirs?" Viktor's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just teenage rebellion. This was the language of the enemy. It was the kind of rhetoric he read in the transcripts of dissidents, the kind of bourgeois moralizing that the West broadcast over the airwaves. "You have been listening to someone," Viktor said. It wasn't a question. "Who have you been talking to at the archive?" "No one," Andrei lied. "It's just an observation." "Observations are never just observations," Viktor said, his voice dropping an octave. "They are the seeds of action, and you, Andrei, are in a position of trust. You are a Volkov. Do you understand what that name means in this city? It means loyalty. It means we do not ask questions that have no answers. I just think." "Do not think," Viktor snapped, slamming his hand on the table. The china rattled. "Your job is not to think. Your job is to serve. If you are confused, read Marx. Read Lenin. Do not pollute your mind with the whining of intellectuals who have never done a hard day's work in their lives." The dinner ended in silence. Andrei excused himself and went to his room. Viktor remained at the table, staring at his son's empty chair. He poured himself a glass of vodka and drank it in one swallow. "He is young, Viktor," Galina whispered, reaching for his hand. "He will learn." "He is not young," Viktor replied, pulling his hand away. "He is 24. At his age, I was commanding a platoon. At his age, I knew exactly who the enemy was." Viktor stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkened city. He made a mental note to check the mileage on the Volga. He made a mental note to review the phone logs. He was a father, yes, but he was a Chekist first, and he would not allow a threat to grow under his own roof, even if that threat wore the face of his son. The weeks following the dinner were a master class in domestic espionage. Viktor did not confront Andrei again. Instead, he applied the tradecraft of the KGB to his own family. He began with the phone. The Volkov apartment had a secure line, but Victor installed a secondary recording tap at the junction box in the hallway, one that bypassed the standard monitoring he was already subjected to as an officer. He listened to every call Andrei made. Most were innocent, calls to the archive, to the cinema to check showtimes. But there were gaps. Times when Andrei said he was going to the library but didn't return for hours. Victor began to track his son's movements. He didn't do it himself. That would be too conspicuous. He utilized a favor from a subordinate, a young lieutenant named Dymov, who was eager to please the colonel. Dymov was assigned to keep an eye on a potential security risk near the archive. He wasn't told the target was the colonel's son. He was just given a description and a schedule. The reports began to trickle in. The subject was seen meeting with a known person of interest, Nikolai S., a student with a file in the ideological deviation department. The subject was seen entering a building in the Podil district that was known to house several artists and writers who operated on the fringes of legality. Victor read these reports in his office, his stomach churning with cold fury. His son was not just asking questions, he was associating with the infection. Meanwhile, Andrei was becoming reckless. Emboldened by his collection of stolen documents, he had decided to take the next step. He wanted to get the information out. He had heard rumors of a channel, a way to pass documents to foreign journalists or diplomats visiting Kyiv. It was a suicide mission, usually reserved for the most hardened dissidents. He confided in Nikolai. "I have proof," Andrei told him as they walked along the frozen embankment of the river. "I have signatures, execution orders, proof that the psychiatric hospitals are being used as prisons." Nikolai stopped walking. His face was pale. "Andrei, stop. You are playing a game you don't understand. If they catch you with that..." "They won't catch me. I'm a Volkov." "Who suspects a Volkov? That name is a target, not a shield," Nikolai hissed. "Burn the papers. Forget you ever saw them." "I can't," Andrei said. "If I burn them, I become like them. I become an accomplice." He didn't notice the black sedan parked 50 meters away, the man in the passenger seat snapping photographs with a telephoto lens. He didn't know that his father was already reviewing the file on Nikolai, preparing an arrest warrant that would be executed the moment it was politically convenient. Andrei's fatal mistake was arrogance. He believed his father's status protected him. He didn't understand that in the Soviet system, the higher you climbed, the more precarious your footing became. His father wasn't protecting him. His father was calculating the blast radius. It was Galina who found the smoking gun. It was a Tuesday in November. Andrei was at work. Victor was at headquarters. Galina had come home early with a migraine. She wandered into Andrei's room, intending to close the curtains against the gray afternoon light. She saw the old television set in the corner. It was dusty. Her motherly instinct kicked in, a desire to clean, to organize. She fetched a cloth and began wiping the casing. As she moved the set, the back panel, which Andrei had failed to screw back in tightly, shifted. She frowned. She pulled at the panel. It came away easily. Inside, nestled among the dusty vacuum tubes and wires, was a thick manila envelope. Galina's heart stopped. She knew what a secret looked like. She had spent 30 years married to a spy. She reached in, her hands trembling, and pulled out the envelope. It was heavy. She sat on the edge of Andrei's bed and opened it. She pulled out the first document. It was a photocopy of a report from 1938 regarding the liquidation of nationalist elements in the Kharkiv region. She turned the page. A list of names. She turned another page. A transcript of a broadcast from Radio Liberty, handwritten in Andrei's distinct looping script. She felt like she was drowning. This wasn't just contraband. This was treason. Under Article 64 of the RSFSR Criminal Code and its Ukrainian equivalent, this was treason against the motherland. The punishment was death by firing squad. She sat there for a long time. The document spread out on the bedspread like a fan of death warrants. She thought of her son, his laugh as a baby, his first day of school, the way he looked in his pioneer uniform. She loved him with a fierce, possessive love. But she also loved her life. She loved her position. She loved the respect she commanded. And she knew with terrifying clarity. What would happen if the KGB found this during a raid? It wouldn't just be Andrei, it would be Victor, it would be her. They would be stripped of everything, exiled, imprisoned, or worse. The door to the apartment opened, heavy footsteps in the hall. "Galina?" Victor's voice. She froze. Panic, hot and sharp, surged through her. She had seconds to decide. Hide it? Burn it? Confront Andrei? Victor appeared in the doorway of the bedroom. He was still in his greatcoat, bringing the smell of cold air and tobacco into the room. He looked at Galina. Then he looked at the bed. He looked at the papers. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He walked into the room, his eyes fixed on the evidence. He picked up one of the pages, the transcript of the foreign radio broadcast. He read it slowly. Then he looked at the photocopy of the execution order. He looked at his wife. His face was a mask of tragedy, but his eyes were hard as flint. "How long?" he asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "I just found it," Galina sobbed, the tears finally breaking through. "Victor, I just found it. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's a child. It's a mistake." "It is not a mistake," Victor said, his voice devoid of emotion. "It is a dossier. He is collecting evidence against the state." "We can burn it," Galina pleaded, standing up and grabbing his arm. "Victor, please. We can burn it right now. No one has to know. We will talk to him. We will send him away. To the countryside. To your brother in Omsk. We can fix this." Victor looked at her, and for a moment, Galina saw a flicker of the husband she had married, the man who had once brought her flowers. But then the colonel returned. The loyal servant of the state stepped forward. "Galina," he said gently, removing her hand from his arm. "You know that is not possible. If he has this, he has shared it. If he has shared it, there are others. If I burn this, and he is caught by someone else, I become a co-conspirator. I become a traitor." "He is your son!" she screamed. "I have no son," Victor said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "I have a security breach." He gathered the papers methodically, putting them back into the envelope. He tucked the envelope under his arm. "Where is he?" Victor asked. "He is at the library," Galina whispered, sinking back onto the bed, her face buried in her hands. "He said he would be home for dinner." Victor nodded. He checked his watch. "Wash your face, Galina. Fix your hair. We have to wait for him." "What are you going to do?" she asked, looking up at him with terrified eyes. "I am going to do my duty," Victor said, and he walked out of the room, leaving his wife alone with the ghost of the son who was still alive, but already dead. The apartment was silent when Andrei returned at 6:15 p.m. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a submarine before a depth charge detonates. He hung his coat on the rack, shivering slightly from the damp chill of the Kyiv evening. He called out a greeting, expecting the usual sounds of the television or the clatter of pans from the kitchen. There was no answer. He walked into the living room. His parents were sitting at the dining table. The table was not set for dinner. There was no food, no plates, no silverware. In the center of the polished oak surface sat the manila envelope. Andrei stopped. His breath hitched in his throat. The world seemed to narrow down to that single object. The envelope was open, the corner of the photocopied execution order visible against the dark wood. Victor sat at the head of the table, still in his uniform. He did not look like a father. He looked like the institution he served. His face was a landscape of frozen tundra, devoid of warmth, devoid of mercy. Galina sat to his right, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed and fixed on her hands, which were clasped white-knuckled in her lap. "Sit down," Victor said. It wasn't a request. It was a command issued to a subordinate. Andrei didn't move. His mind was racing, calculating escape routes that didn't exist. The door was behind him, but where would he go? He had no money, no passport, and his name was Volkov. He was trapped. "I said sit down," Victor repeated, his voice rising only slightly, but carrying the weight of the entire Soviet security apparatus. Andrei walked to his chair, his legs feeling like lead. He sat. He looked at the envelope, then at his mother. "Mom?" he whispered. Galina didn't look up. She flinched at the sound of his voice, a small, pained spasm that told him everything he needed to know. She had not defended him. She had turned him in. "We are not here to discuss family matters," Victor said, placing his hand flat on the table. "We are here to discuss Article 64, treason against the motherland. Do you recognize these documents?" "They are research," Andrei stammered, his voice sounding thin and childish in the large room. "For the archive. It's history, Father. It is anti-Soviet propaganda," Victor corrected him, his tone clinical. "It is a collection of lies and state secrets manufactured by Western intelligence services to undermine the confidence of the Soviet people. Possession of these materials is a crime. Dissemination is a crime. Intent is a crime." Victor leaned forward. "Who gave them to you?" "I found them," Andrei lied. "In the trash, at work." "Do not lie to me," Victor roared, the sudden noise making Galina jump. "I am not your father right now, Andrei Viktorovich. I am a colonel of the KGB, and you are a suspect in an espionage investigation. You met with Nikolai S. 3 times last week. You visited the apartment on Yaroslaviv Val Street. We have photographs. We have transcripts. We know." Andrei stared at him. You were watching me?" "I am always watching," Victor said. "That is my job. To protect this state from parasites." "I am your son," Andrei said, tears welling in his eyes. "Doesn't that mean anything? I am your flesh and blood." Victor looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You ceased to be my son the moment you decided to betray everything I have built, everything your mother has built. Do you think we survived the war, the purges, the famine, just so you could play at being a revolutionary? You are a selfish, arrogant child who is about to destroy this family." Victor stood up. He walked to the phone on the sideboard. He picked up the receiver and dialed a 3-digit number. "This is Colonel Volkov," he said into the phone. "I have a detainee at my residence. Priority 1. Send a team." He hung up. Andrei sat frozen. The reality of it was too large to comprehend. His father had just called the Black Marias to take him away. "Run," Galina whispered. Victor spun around to look at her. "Run, Andrei," she said, looking up, tears streaming down her face. "Run out the door. Please." "He will go nowhere," Victor said, drawing his service pistol from his holster and placing it on the table. "He will sit here and he will accept the consequences of his actions. If he runs, he proves his guilt. If he runs, he is a fugitive. At least this way." "At least this way what?" Andrei asked, his voice trembling with rage. "At least this way you get a promotion." "At least this way," Victor said, his eyes cold. "We control the narrative. We turn you in. We show that we are loyal. If they found this without us, we would all be against the wall." They sat in silence for 20 minutes. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Then, the sound of heavy tires on the asphalt outside. Car doors slamming. Heavy boots on the stairs. When the knock came, Victor went to the door. He opened it to reveal 3 junior officers, men he knew, men he had trained. "The prisoner is in the dining room," Victor said. "Secure the evidence on the table." As the officers grabbed Andrei, twisting his arms behind his back, he looked at his mother one last time. She was weeping silently, her head bowed. He looked at his father. Victor stood at attention, watching the arrest with the detached professionalism of a coroner. "Goodbye, Colonel," Andrei spat as they dragged him out. Victor did not respond. Andrei was taken to the KGB headquarters on Volodymyrska Street, the gray house that every citizen of Kyiv walked past with their eyes averted. He was stripped of his clothes, his watch, and his name. He was given a gray uniform made of coarse cotton and assigned to cell 412 in the basement isolation ward. The interrogation began 2 hours later. Viktor Volkov did not conduct the questioning. That would have been a violation of protocol and perhaps a bridge too far even for him. Instead, the case was assigned to Major Kogan, a specialist in ideological extraction. Kogan was a small, unassuming man with a soft voice and a polite demeanor. He sat across from Andrei in a small room lit by a single blinding bulb. "Andrei Viktorovich," Kogan began, opening a fresh pack of cigarettes. "We have a problem. Your father is a respected man, a hero. You have put him in a very difficult position. I want a lawyer." Andrei said, Kogan smiled. It was a sad, indulgent smile. Andrei, please. This is not America. You are under investigation for treason under Article 64. There are no lawyers here. There is only the truth. And the truth is, you have been working for foreign interests. I was working for the truth, Andrei said. The files, they prove crimes were committed. The only crime, Kogan said, lighting a cigarette and blowing smoke into Andrei's face, is the one you committed by stealing state property. Now, let us talk about your network. Who gave you the instructions? Who is your handler? For the first 3 days, Andrei held out. He refused to name Nikolai or anyone else. He insisted he acted alone. Then they started the conveyor. They didn't beat him. They didn't need to. They simply didn't let him sleep. They kept him in the interrogation room for 48 hours straight. Teams of interrogators rotated in shifts. Every time his eyes closed, they shouted at him, or splashed cold water on his face, or forced him to stand up and march in place. They played on his guilt. Your mother has been suspended from her job, Kogan told him on the 4th day. She is under house arrest. Because of you. She may lose her pension. She may lose the apartment. Is that what you wanted? To destroy your mother? Andrei wept from exhaustion. The hallucinations started on the 5th day. He saw faces in the peeling paint on the wall. He heard his father's voice coming from the ventilation grate. On the 6th day, Viktor Volkov entered the observation room. He stood behind the one-way mirror, watching his son. Andrei was a wreck, unshaven, trembling, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He is ready, Viktor said into the intercom. Kogan went back in with a confession typed out. Sign it, Andrei, Kogan said softly. Sign it, and you can sleep. Sign it, and we can help your mother. If you don't sign, we will bring her in. We will put her in the cell next to yours, and she is not a strong woman. It was a lie, but Andrei didn't know that. The thought of his mother in this hell was the breaking point. With a shaking hand, he took the pen. He signed the confession. He admitted to being recruited by foreign agents. He admitted to planning to smuggle documents out of the country. He admitted to everything they invented, just to close his eyes. He implicated no one else. He took the entire weight of the fabricated plot onto his own shoulders, believing it was the only noble thing left to do. The trial took place on December 20th, 1977. It was not a public trial. There were no journalists, no jury, no gallery of weeping relatives. It was a closed session of the military tribunal of the Kyiv military district. The courtroom was a small, wood-paneled chamber deep within the administrative complex. 3 military judges sat on a raised dais. Andrei sat in a wooden cage on the left. The prosecutor, a colonel from Moscow, sat on the right. Andrei had been appointed a defense counsel, a military lawyer who had not spoken to him once before the trial began. The lawyer's job was not to defend him, but to ensure the procedural forms were filled out correctly. The proceedings lasted 4 hours. The prosecutor presented the evidence, the stolen documents, the radio transcripts, the signed confession. He painted a picture of a spoiled, ungrateful youth who had been seduced by the decadence of the West and had sought to sell his country's secrets for blue jeans and rock music. It was a grotesque caricature of Andrei's actual motivations, but the truth was irrelevant. The narrative was what mattered. Then came the witnesses. The prosecutor called Colonel Viktor Volkov to the stand. Andrei looked up. He hadn't seen his father since the arrest. Viktor walked to the witness stand with his usual rigid posture. He did not look at the cage. He did not look at his son. State your name and rank, the judge said. Viktor Petrovich Volkov. Colonel. State Security. Colonel, can you describe the circumstances under which the evidence was found? I discovered the materials in the defendant's bedroom, Viktor said, his voice devoid of inflection. Upon reviewing them, I identified them as anti-Soviet in nature. I immediately secured the suspect and contacted the authorities. Did the defendant express remorse? He expressed anti-Soviet sentiments. He attempted to justify his treason. Colonel, the judge asked, as a father, did you have any indication of your son's deviation? Viktor paused. For a second, just a microsecond, his mask slipped. His hand twitched on the railing. I failed to see the signs. I was too focused on my duties. It is a failure I regret. But my loyalty to the state comes before my loyalty to blood. Andrei closed his eyes. It was the final betrayal. Then they called Galina. She was a ghost of her former self. She had lost weight. Her hair was unkempt. She trembled as she took the stand. "Citizen Volkova," the prosecutor said gently, "we understand this is difficult, but we must know. Did you support your son's activities?" "No," she whispered. "Speak up, please." "No," she cried out. "I did not know. We raised him to be a patriot. We gave him everything. I don't know who this person is. He is not my son. My son died." She broke down into hysterical sobbing and had to be helped from the room. Andrei watched her go, his heart turning to stone. She had disowned him to save herself. The verdict was a formality, guilty on all counts under Article 64. The sentence was read by the presiding judge. In view of the severity of the crime, the betrayal of the high trust placed in him, and the danger posed to the state, Andrei Viktorovich Volkov is sentenced to the supreme measure of punishment, death by shooting, with confiscation of all property. Andrei did not react. He felt nothing. He was already dead. The execution was scheduled for January 15, 1978. Andrei spent his final weeks on death row in Lukyanivska prison. The cells were in the basement, damp and silent. He was not allowed letters. He was not allowed visitors. He was alone with his thoughts. He thought about the files he had found. He thought about the millions of people who had passed through this machine before him. He realized, with a strange sense of peace, that he was now part of that history. He wasn't an observer anymore. He was a victim, and in the twisted logic of the system, that made him honest. On the morning of the 15th, the guards came for him at 4 a.m. They didn't tell him where he was going. They simply told him to dress. He was walked down a long corridor lined with green tiles. The air smelled of bleach and old iron. He was led into a room with a sloping concrete floor and a drain in the center. The walls were lined with soundproofing material. A prosecutor was there, yawning, holding a clipboard. A doctor stood by the wall, and the executioner, a man in a leather apron, stood behind a heavy steel door. "Andrei Viktorovich Volkov," the prosecutor read rapidly, "your petition for clemency has been denied by the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet. The sentence will be carried out immediately." Andrei looked at them. He wanted to say something. He wanted to leave a final word, but he realized they didn't care. To them, he was just paperwork, a file to be closed. "Turn around," the guard said. Andrei turned to face the wall. He closed his eyes. He tried to remember the face of a girl he had liked in university. He tried to remember the sound of the Dnieper River in summer. The executioner stepped forward. He held a standard-issue Makarov pistol. He placed the barrel against the base of Andrei's skull, angled slightly upward. There was a pop, not much louder than a champagne cork. Andrei Volkov collapsed. The doctor stepped forward, checked the pulse, and nodded. The prosecutor signed the death certificate. The time was 4:17 a.m. The body was placed in a canvas sack. It was loaded onto a truck and driven to the Bykivnia forest on the outskirts of Kyiv, a place where thousands of victims of the NKVD had been buried in the 1930s. Andrei was thrown into an unmarked pit, covered with lime and dirt. There was no funeral, no grave marker. Under Soviet law, the bodies of executed political prisoners were not returned to their families. The location of the burial was a state secret. Chapter 11. The aftermath. The notification arrived by mail 3 days later. A small slip of paper delivered to the Volkov apartment. "The sentence regarding your son has been carried out. His personal effects have been confiscated." Viktor Volkov read the note standing in the hallway. He folded it neatly and placed it in his pocket. He went to work, but the system was not done with him. 2 weeks later, Viktor was summoned to the office of the general. "Viktor Petrovich," the general said, not offering him a seat. "The situation with your son, it has created an awkwardness. The center feels that, despite your loyalty, your judgment has been compromised. A man who cannot control his own house cannot be trusted to control the state." Viktor was forced into early retirement. He was stripped of his active command, though he was allowed to keep his rank and his pension, a mercy granting only because he had turned his son in himself. He and Galina remained in the apartment on Khreshchatyk Street, but the apartment changed. It became a tomb. Galina stopped working. She claimed illness and resigned from the ministry. She rarely left the house. Neighbors whispered that they could hear her walking the halls at night, talking to someone who wasn't there. She began to set a place at the dinner table for Andrei. Every night. A plate, a fork, a glass. Victor watched this madness unfold with stoic detachment. He spent his days sitting in the park, playing chess with other old men, or drinking vodka in the kitchen. He never spoke of Andrei. He erased the boy from his mind just as he had erased him from the files. But the guilt was a cancer. It ate at them from the inside. In 1982, Galina died of a stroke. She collapsed in Andrei's old bedroom, clutching one of his childhood books. Victor lived on. He became a ghost in the city. He watched the world change. He watched perestroika. He watched the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. He saw the statues of Lenin being torn down. He saw the archives opened. In 1993, a young journalist knocked on his door. He was writing a book about the KGB in Kyiv. "Colonel Volkov?" the journalist asked, standing in the doorway. "I found a file about an Andrei Volkov. Was he your relation?" Victor looked at the young man. He looked at the tape recorder in his hand. He looked at the new world outside, a world of chaos and freedom that he hated. "I have no son," Victor said, and he closed the door. Viktor Volkov died in 1999, alone in the apartment. When the authorities cleared out the property, they found the dining room table set for 3 people, and in Victor's desk drawer, locked in a small box, they found a single photograph of Andrei, aged 5, laughing on a swing set. The edges of the photo were worn white, as if it had been held and stared at 1,000 times. Chapter 12. The Legacy. Today, the Central State Archive in Kyiv is open to the public. It is a place of research, of uncovering the traumas of the past. In the reading room, if you request file number 77894, you will receive a thick cardboard folder. Inside are the yellowing pages of Andrei Volkov's interrogation, the confession signed with a shaky hand, the death warrant signed by a bureaucrat who is long dead. There is no statue of Andrei Volkov. He is not a famous dissident. He didn't start a revolution. He didn't bring down the empire. He was just a young man who looked at the truth and blinked and was crushed for it. But his story, and the story of the parents who sacrificed him to the Moloch of the state, is a terrifying reminder of what totalitarianism demands. It demands more than just obedience. It demands the surrender of the soul. It demands that love be secondary to ideology. The Volkov family seemed perfect. They had power, status, and comfort. But it was a facade built on a foundation of bones, and when the pressure came, the foundation crumbled, and the family devoured itself. In the forest of Bukivnia, there is now a memorial complex to the victims of political repression. Trees are wrapped in embroidered towels, photographs nailed to the bark. Somewhere in that quiet, pine-scented earth lie the remains of Andrei Volkov. He is surrounded by the very people he tried to speak for, the poets, the priests, the farmers. In death, he finally found the company he sought in life. As we look back at the Kyiv incident of 1977, we are left with the chilling question, what would you do? If the state demanded your child, would you stand in front of the gun? Or would you, like Victor and Galina, open the door and let the executioner in?